Welcome to the League of Women Voters Candidate Forum for the Illinois Senate 21st District. This event is being recorded. The Naperville League is proud to present tonight's candidate forum in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Glen Ellyn. I am Susan Craighead, President of the League of Women Voters of Naperville. The League is a nonpartisan organization. We do not support or oppose candidates for public office. You can rely on the League to present fair and civil candidate forums where each candidate is allowed an equal chance to respond. Election Day 2022 is only a few short weeks away. Now is the time to make your plan for how you will cast your vote safely and securely on or before Tuesday, November 8th. We hope that part of your plan is to educate yourself on the candidates and the issues in order to confidently vote the whole ballot. In addition to watching candidate forums live or recorded, you may also find candidate information on vote411.org, our nonpartisan online voter guide. All candidates have been invited to respond to questions, and their answers appear there complete and unedited. A video of this candidate forum will be linked to Vote 411. And now, let me introduce our moderator for tonight, Carol Tidwell.
Thank you, Susan. And welcome everyone to the candidate forum for the Illinois 21st General Assembly Senate election in 2022. It's being sponsored by the Glen Ellyn and Naperville chapters of the League of Women Voters. And thanks to the audience who is watching this live on Zoom and Facebook or watching a recording. My name is Carol Tidwell, and I have been trained by the League to conduct candidate forums. I do not live or vote in the 21st Senate District. We're following League rules for the forum tonight. After opening statements by the candidates, I will ask a number of questions that were prepared by the sponsors and which were not provided to the candidates ahead of time. Since this is a forum and not a debate, I ask that the candidates direct their statements and responses to the audience and not to each other. As per forum rules, the candidates will not use their cell phones or other electronic devices during the forum when answering questions. Please understand that the League of Women Voters is not responsible for verifying the accuracy of the statements that candidates make during this forum. The candidates will each have 3 minutes to present an opening statement in turn and up to 3 minutes to respond to each question again in turn. At the end of the forum, they will each have 3 minutes to make a closing statement. The timekeeper will keep us on track in the interests of time and fairness to each candidate. I ask the candidates to watch the screen as you are speaking. Time reminders will appear at 1 minute, 30 seconds, 15 seconds, and then stop. The candidate speaking should wind down at the 15-second warning and stop speaking when the stop sign appears, although I will allow a couple of extra words so you can complete your sentence, but please, no compound sentences. We want to get in as many questions as we can and give the same amount of time to both candidates. The candidates will be asked to speak in alphabetical order, and we will rotate who has the chance to be first to answer a question. We're going to get started, so both candidates should now come onto the screen. I ask that you keep yourself muted until it is your turn to speak. And we will start with opening statements from candidate Ellman. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Carol, and thank you for this opportunity for the voters. My name is Laura Ellman. I'm an engineer, a mom of 2 public school kids who I just sent off to college. I'm a wife, and just this year I became a cancer survivor. I've raised my family here in Naperville, and my husband's music store has been here since 1958. We have deep roots in this community. I've been serving as state senator for almost 4 years, just one term, And I'm proud of all the progress that we've already made. Unlike 4 years ago, when I'm out talking to people, they sound hopeful. And there's a lot to be hopeful about. Our budget is not only balanced, but we've actually increased our rainy day fund and had 6 credit rating upgrades. We passed historic climate policy with CEJA, and we had the foresight to pass the Reproductive Health Care Act to enshrine a woman's right to an abortion in Illinois. I'm not only proud of our legislative success, but I'm also proud of the services that we've been able to provide constituents. During COVID, we helped hundreds of constituents with their unemployment claims. And we also helped dozens of people with their FOID card and their concealed carry applications. But one of the things that has given me most joy is bringing ideas that come right from the district and making them laws. One constituent saw that A1C diabetes screening was not covered by insurance. So she brought it to me and I got the law drafted, passed, filed, and passed. A constituent's son died of an opioid overdose on Christmas morning because those who were around him were afraid to get in trouble themselves if they called 911. So I got Alex's law drafted, filed, and passed. And right now we're working on 2 constituent initiatives, which both have been drafted already. And I'm partnering with Representative Janet Yang Rohr on a 3rd. I'm proud of all the things we've already accomplished, but I'm a problem solver. I'm an engineer, so I'm always looking for what's next. This district wants safe neighborhoods and schools, and our next big job is going to be to enact common sense gun legislation. I'm dedicated to working hard for the district and fighting for our values by listening to science, listening to stakeholders, and most of all, listening to constituents. And let's get this job done. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, your opening statement, please.
Thank you also for having me here today. My name is Kathleen Murray. I'm an executive in the technology industry for over 6 years. And prior to that, I spent 16 years as an executive in the hardware and plumbing sector. I'm also a small business owner. I own a restaurant in downtown Wheaton, and I operate a food truck. So I'm very familiar with the challenges and cost of operating in Illinois. I have my MBA and bachelor's in psychology. In the late 90s, at the start of my career, I had a dual focus on business law and mental health. I had an internship and later work in a mental health facility. I was also the director of research for justice publications under Judge Robert Hunter, who authored the trial handbooks and Illinois lawyers and federal trial handbook. My time with Judge Robert Hunter really provided me a unique view of the law in action, as opposed to just reading written words. As I mentioned, I am an executive in the technology industry, and my current title is CCO and president of global sales for Titanium Technologies. I have had most of my career is spent, the last 2 decades has been spent overseas in Asia as well as Europe. I've had a lot of experience in balancing corporate budgets, negotiations, international relations, and obviously my experience in the corporate sector. I feel that there's a lot of skill sets that can transfer over into legislation. And so while I don't have experience in being a legislator, things like my negotiations, it's a skill that would enable me to work with others in the government who have opposing views in order to achieve policy goals that are bipartisan. I've also been very involved in mental health related issues. I founded the Healing Invisible Wounds campaign several years ago to help bring awareness to suicide prevention to veterans and first responders. I'm a mom. I have a daughter who's attending college overseas in Italy, and my son is a sophomore at Montini Catholic. I'm a lifelong resident of Illinois. approaching half a decade almost. And I live in my childhood home, and I'm raising my children in that home. So I'm very deeply rooted in the community. I never wanted to be a politician. I didn't aspire to be a politician, but the last 2 years, I've been very dissatisfied with what's been happening. And I decided it's my time to stand up and do something about it.
Thank you. And candidate Murray, the first question will be to you. And it is this: in building a vibrant state economy, what policies would you prioritize? Please unmute.
There are several policies that come to top of mind for me, but I would say crime is the reason why I decided to run. I was at Oak Brook Mall during the December 23rd Christmas shooting, and it was those moments when I turned to take cover from getting a bullet, and that it was a catalyst to having me run. So law and order and public safety are top of mind to me. I have a lot of concerns. I'm sure we're going to get into probably questions on the Safety Act. But I think crime is on the rise. It's a problem. It's terrifying what's happened. The Democrats have policies in place with social justice reform that's emboldening criminals, and it's only going to cause crime to continue to increase and continue to destroy our state.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, that question to you, please. And candidates, if either of you wish me to repeat a question at any time, just let me know. Candidate Ellman?
Yes, Ms. Tidwell, could you repeat the question?
I certainly can. In building a vibrant state economy, what policies would you prioritize?
Thank you. So I come from a working class family. One of my grandfathers was actually a farmer who followed the harvest from Oklahoma to South Dakota. My other grandfather came from Pennsylvania, coal country. His family were coal miners. They came to Illinois because of the opportunity that this state affords. Our economy and our opportunity continues to attract more people. And in fact, the latest census shows that Illinois is growing despite national trends of people going to the Sun Belt. I just spoke in a manufacturing event about what companies look for when locating their business. They want infrastructure, access to markets, skilled and educated workers, and good quality of life. And when you look particularly at District 21, we really have it all. I mean, access to the largest inland port in North America, air, rail, and road arteries that connect all over the country and to the world, highly educated workers, obviously, and best-in-class public schools. And we do have the culture, the green space, the arts, and the liveliness that can make this place pretty darn terrific. But we can grow this statewide. Illinois has got a diverse economy. We've got agriculture, energy, healthcare, manufacturing. My husband is a small business owner, so I know how challenging it can be for small business to compete and thrive. Small businesses, especially downstate, they need access to broadband to find new customers and new markets. Another thing that we've already done and will continue to do policy-wise is to make sure that we have our infrastructure in place. Last session, we passed a historic capital and infrastructure bill that not only plans for years of investment on roads, bridges, rail, but it has also uniquely positioned us to receive federal funds from the bipartisan infrastructure bill really quickly. Now, we'll probably talk about CEJA, but we've got CEJA and electric vehicle incentives that will attract businesses and new technology right here in the state to grow our economy. I also want to mention, because it's one of my favorite projects, is hydrogen. My hydrogen plan is a bipartisan investment plan from the federal government, but we will add on top of what we've already done hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in new green technology that will create new businesses, new trade paths, and new jobs. And frankly, as I said at the manufacturing event.
Thank you, Candidate Ellman.
Oh, thank you. I'm bullish.
Candidate Ellman, the next question is to you first, and it is this. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our state?
Thank you. I just want to mention that District 21 has got some of the most, quite a diverse population. And in fact, our Asian American community is one of the most populous in the state. But I want to mention something, and it sounds really corny, and I'm kind of embarrassed to even say it, but in my desk drawer in Springfield, in the top drawer with my pens and pencils and paper clips, I have a slip of paper that I wrote for myself when I first started. And it's just a little piece of paper that says, serve with love. We need to make Illinois work for everyone. If it doesn't work for anyone, let's work on that. If it works for some people, but not others, let's work on that too. And I'm committed to making Illinois a better place for everyone. Some examples of bills that I've supported are to make sure that school lunches, if they're provided by a school, that they offer halal, kosher, vegetarian, something as simple as having dietary preferences met at schools allows for social justice and allows those schools to be more welcoming. We also passed a bill for Muslim girls, particularly to participate in sports, so that they can wear a hijab in athletics. We've also passed 2 bills, and I carried one of them, ensuring that contributions of Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders and people from all major religions are recognized in what we teach our kids. And I was just part of an education advisory council that recognized that when kids see themselves reflected in the materials and in their schools, they do so much better. And one more thing I want to mention. As chair of financial institutions, I recognize how important it is for social justice to be done on an economic scale. And we passed a bill against predatory lending. Those who prey on the most vulnerable. We set a cap of 36% annual percentage rate, so that people have the chance to borrow at equitable levels. So no matter where we come from, whether we're immigrants, no matter what our color, we work hard for our families. And I want to work hard to make sure that Illinois serves everybody.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, that question to you now, please.
Could you repeat the full question, please?
Yes, I can. What policies will you pursue to promote social and racial justice in our state?
Thank you. First and foremost, I think that I agree with Senator Ellman that our Senate District 21 is very diverse, but I think that it all starts with education. And currently, there's a very big achievement gap between, for example, Black students and white students. There's a 30% achievement gap, and this was made worse during the shutdowns. So I think that, I'm gonna also look, I think I have some statistics here that in Decatur, for example, only 2% of Black children can read or perform math at grade level. In Rockford, 7%, Elgin, 11% of Hispanic children. We're not properly educating these kids. Our school systems are failing them. So for me, I would invest in policies that help support these communities that would benefit the most. And there's the Invest in Kids Act, which I'm very much supportive of. And this is where the money tax dollars should follow the child, with parents getting vouchers for the school of their choice. This would benefit a lot of low-income families, particularly Black and Hispanic children, for example, to have that access to quality education and a choice to attend private school in a better neighborhood. I can't comprehend how any legislator would not be in support of this. So I think that for me, it starts with education and eliminating this gap. From a social standpoint issues, I believe all people are created equal. I support the rights of every individual, but I also don't think that policies should be forced down the throat of people that I don't think the policies, certain social policies that I'm sure we're going to cover later, should be forced in the schools, for example, at a very young and inappropriate age. But so I think for me the first step in policy would start at the schools.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, this next question is for you first, and it is this. Do you believe that reproductive rights should be under the jurisdiction of the state or federal government?
I am personally, morally, and ethically pro-life. However, I do recognize a woman's right to bodily autonomy. A woman should make her own medical decisions. I don't think the government has any place in the decision whether for abortion or against abortion. However, I do not support elective, late term, or partial abortions unless the mother's life is at risk or there is a medical diagnosis that is recognized in a later term that the child, for example, would be born with a genetic disorder or defect that would cause suffering and childhood death. I also, on the same topic, I am very much supportive of parental notification. I can't comprehend how I have to sign a waiver to have my son have an aspirin at school, but not have a major medical procedure, which can have detrimental emotional issues for a child, to allow a minor to have an abortion. So parents need to be able to guide the health and safety of a child. And this is, to me, is common sense. However, I'm very surprised that legislation is passing to take the parental rights away. I also want to comment that, in my personal experience, I think many women choose to abort due to their fear and lack of financial resources to support a baby, and maybe not the most ideal circumstances. And so perhaps some of the resources that are channeled towards the Planned Parenthood, for example, should be shifted to help women have more choices than just feeling the pressure to abort.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, that question to you, please.
Thank you. Yes, I will be perfectly clear. I support a woman's right to choose. We had the foresight to see that Roe v. Wade decision could be overturned. And so in 2019, we passed the Reproductive Health Care Act, RHA, to make sure that abortion is a fundamental right and it's safe for those seeking it. In America, we value our freedoms: freedom to retire in dignity, decide whether and where we grow our families, and to know our kids will make it home safe. These freedoms are under attack. You can see Republicans, particularly in Republican state houses, want to take away our freedoms. They're putting the control over women's autonomy in the hands of politicians, the hands of Texas bounty hunters, the hands of people who can gain access to a woman's GPS, shopping, and health tracking apps. Republicans want to control women's autonomy, travel, and participation in the economy. I'm proud of the battle that we waged in 2019 to secure a woman's right to choose and rights to access to healthcare, but we're still working. One of the initiatives that came right from this district was a local doctor who noted that those who are seeking care, those who are seeking abortion and who are referred to other providers, they could get hit with an out-of-network charge. So we're drafting legislation so that this type of healthcare is similar to other types of healthcare, so that if you're referred out of network, you still get the same in-network price. Let me just be clear, we cannot go back. Illinois will not roll back our rights and our freedoms.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, this next question is to you first. What steps would you take to collaborate with legislators of another party to pass legislation important to your constituents?
Oh, thank you. Well, I'll give you an example. Well, first of all, I have good working relationships with a lot of senators across the aisle, some that are right in this area. Senator Curran from Naperville, Senator DeWitt from St. Charles, Senator Rezin from a little bit farther downstate. We've worked together already. Partisanship, it makes the headlines, but in fact, and this was kind of a surprise to me, in the Senate, we actually have a more collegial environment than the headlines and the media might show. But my example is my A1C diabetes bill that came right from our district. This is common sense policy, lowering the overall costs for healthcare. And this passed bipartisan. It was a bipartisan bill. And again, I mentioned Senator Rezin. She and I are working together on hydrogen so that all of these benefits can benefit everybody throughout the state. For one, I'm proud to work across party lines to get things done. And it's one of the things that I take pride in.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, that question to you now, please.
Could you repeat the question again?
Yes, I can. What steps would you take to collaborate with legislators of another party to pass legislation important to your constituents?
I realized that the only way to affect change and improve Illinois would be a bipartisan approach and working across the aisle with people who have different perspectives than me. I mentioned earlier when I gave a little background that I come from a background in the corporate world. I worked internationally. I worked with China a lot. I worked with Thailand and Asia and different cultures in Europe. And similarly, there were cultural differences, not just perspectives on different work related issues. So I'm very accustomed to working with people who don't share the same perspective as me, but the goal being one and of the same, which is accomplishing things that are going to help and better the state. And while we may come from different perspectives, there's always a way to negotiate and come to a good solution. And that's also why I mentioned earlier my expertise in negotiation and background in psychology. I know how to work with people, and I do it every day.
Thank you. The next question is to you first, Candidate Murray. and it's this. What changes, if any, would you make to evidence-based funding equation, to the evidence-based funding equation?
I'm not really sure I understand that question. I'm sorry. Evidence-based funding. Is there something in particular?
It refers to funding of schools and education in the state.
Okay, I wasn't clear with evidence-based. With regards to higher education, for example, I think that higher education needs to be accessible. There's a rising costs in higher education, and it's a problem that needs to be addressed. Since the 1980s, college tuition has increased by 1,200%. This is due to bloat with colleges with excessive administration costs, high salaries, more amenities, like rock climbing walls, for example, leading all to higher tuition. So, the state is spending less on higher education, so students have a bigger burden. And, a larger percentage of the state funding is going to pensions and not the classroom. I think 15 years ago, 9% of the state's higher education budget was for pensions. Now it's at 50%. So we do need to invest in education and reallocating funds to higher education. I think technology is an obvious low-cost solution, utilizing online and distance learning. Community colleges, I think we need to increase funding to community colleges and look at moving these community colleges to a 4-year degree. I also think there's a responsibility in the corporate sector to recognize that college degree isn't the golden ticket for entry-level jobs, and skills and experience should be considered. So.
Thank you. Candidate Elman, that question to you, please.
Could you please repeat the question? Thank you.
Certainly. What changes, if any, would you make to the evidence-based funding equation?
Okay, thank you. The evidence-based funding formula that was enacted in 2017 before my time in the Senate, and that is for K through 12 funding for the state. Illinois had been notoriously bad. I think they were in 49th place as far as funding K through 12 education, and that's why we now face, and we have faced, such high property taxes. Our local taxes have supported K through 12 education for decades. In 2017, the evidence-based funding formula sought to change that, and it's working. The promise there was to use a formula for distributing state dollars to school districts based on really two things. A school district's achievements as far as students' ability to meet certain goals, and their ability locally to pay for the funding that meets adequacy requirements. So poorer districts will receive more state funding than affluent districts. Districts that don't have as high of education levels or as achievement levels will receive more funding. And one of the things that I was most impressed about that was the formula for those distribution amounts, those allocations, was actually on a spreadsheet that was widely available and very well annotated. And so there are 4 tiers. Tier 1 are the most needy school districts. They get the most funding. Then there's tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. Here in our district, we have got a variety of school districts. We've got tier 4, which is like 203. District 204 is tier 2. Now, I just met with stakeholders this afternoon, someone from a school district, a union member, a teacher, and they were talking about the changes that they'd like to see with evidence-based funding. And this coming year, the legislature is considering tweaking that formula a little bit. So I'm going to take the needs of the school districts in District 21 to Springfield to make sure that our students and our taxpayers' needs are met.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, this next question is to you first. What, if any, changes would you make to the Safety Act?
Thank you. Yes, so I want to mention a couple things about the Safety Act, and I want to tell a story first because there's been a lot of misinformation about the Safety Act. A few weeks ago in Will County, a man was brought into custody for beating his wife, who was 7 months pregnant. He was brought into custody, but he was released on bail, not only free to go back and retaliate with more brutality, but also free so that next time it happens, his wife, the victim, will think twice before calling the cops to seek help. When the Safety Act goes into effect, that won't happen. Dangerous people will not be able to buy their release out of jail. Now, when I was contemplating the Safety Act, and I voted for it, I listened to the chiefs of police and stakeholders on what was happening in my area. And a lot of the things that they already do, the training that they do, the use of dash cams and body cams, getting assistance from mental health professionals on police calls, those are things that take place here locally, and we could expand that across the state. These things are good, they're effective, and they should be standardized statewide. I also listened to their concerns about when they hire police. They already do a great job in requiring the highest standards, and they do background checks. But some bad apples can, if they're fired for cause, they can just go to the next municipality and they can continue to misserve or abuse in the next police force they work in. I have been listening during the course of the summer already to people in law enforcement, to people in the criminal justice system, to hear their concerns about what needs to be clarified, what concerns they have. And I've already brought those to Springfield, and I will continue to work on those particular concerns that are made in good faith to make the Safety Act even better.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, that question to you, please.
No, I am not in support of the Safety Act, especially the elimination of cash bail. Now, putting policy aside for a moment, and I do want to say there are many sections of the bill that I would be in support of, but the Safety Act needs to be repealed. And the reason for this is that it wasn't passed legally and is in violation of the Constitution of Illinois. Any legislator, including my opponent, who voted in favor, violated their oath to follow the Constitution. There's a few reasons for this. First and foremost, there's a single subject rule, one piece of legislation for one subject. There are 764 pages covering the multiple topics. I also want to mention that I am surprised. I read all 764 pages, and I was really shocked to see that so many legislative eyes were supposedly on this. And what jumped out at me, for example, was on page 16, line 25 is duplicated with page 19, line 16. How does this go past and not be caught? And I don't understand that. But getting back on track, the single subject rule was violated. This legislation started as a 7-page document, I think in 2019, and was amended to 764 pages. And I think there's over 200 laws that would be amended and unrelated. The second issue that was in violations is that it requires 3 readings in 3 days, and that did not happen. There are all, and the final reason is there are provisions in the Illinois State Constitution regarding cash bail already. So you cannot pass new legislation without amending the state constitution. So putting the fact that the bill needs to be repealed because it was lawless, and putting that aside for a moment, the issue I have on cash bail, for example, is that, we already have a serious issue with the proliferation of crime in our community. There, to me, there's two ways to modify behavior. There is time and money, obviously money with cash bail and time to sit in jail. So these so-called criminal justice reforms are only going to embolden criminals to commit more crime, as there's no deterrent. It's going to lead to mayhem and more crime, and in my opinion, turn Chicago and our state into a war zone, and it's already in that direction. It seems that legislation seems to be more focused on taking away rights from law-abiding citizens and empowering those who break the law.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, the next question is for you first. How do we ensure adequate and safe water resources in Illinois? Candidate Murray? Yeah, unmute, please.
Sorry about that.
All right.
Can you repeat the question? Water resources?
Yes. How do we ensure adequate and safe water resources in Illinois?
Well, there's already a Federal Protection Act that has, all the regulations in the Illinois EPA that prohibits releasing toxic substances, burning, use of poisons and pesticides. And, the state is already responsible for establishing, reviewing and revising water standards. I obviously support a clean environment for humans and animals. And I stand against pollution and those that violate and harm our environment. So I don't know what specifically you're referring to, but I am, as I said, I'm very much in support of clean environment.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, that question to you, please.
Yeah, thank you. Candidate Murray is right. There are a lot of things that are done on a federal level. And I grew up in the 80s. In the 70s and 80s. And my generation inherited a hole in the ozone layer, smog-filled skies, and rivers that would catch on fire. And we've done a lot towards solving those problems. But now we're finding that there are different types of problems when it comes to water quality. PFAS, for example, perfluoroalkyl sulfates, are known as forever toxins or forever chemicals. And I was actually the first Illinois legislator to introduce and pass a bill that limited the amount of PFAS that could be introduced into our waterways. Just last month, I participated in Great Lakes Legislative Conference that brought together lawmakers from the Great Lakes, from Midwestern states, as well as Canadian provinces, to learn more about what we can do with water quality. We learned a lot more about what we can do with PFAS, and the US, the federal government is starting to catch up, but how we can work together to try to reduce the amount of these toxins in our waterways. I'm sure the audience knows it's a well-educated audience, but these things are actually found in our bloodstreams. They're found in polar bears. They're even found in utero and in our babies before they're even born. So PFAS is one type of pollutant that we really have to work on. It can cause cancer, thyroid problems, and a whole host of other health issues. I've also worked on groundwater quality. Central and particularly Southern Illinois relies on groundwater for their water. I've pushed for clean groundwater that could be potentially contaminated by old construction debris sites, quarries that are filled with with old construction debris. And we're also looking at how nutrients affect and run off into our rivers and then down into the Gulf of Mexico. And we have algal blooms, dead zones in our lakes and in the Gulf of Mexico. So we have a lot to do with water quality, and I'm looking to lead the way. Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, this next question is to you first. What, if any, additional gun safety legislation would you support?
Thank you. Yes, you know, I mentioned in my opening statement that our community values freedom, and we're very concerned with our freedom to assemble and the safety of our kids. The gun violence that occurred, you know, in countless places around the United States, and then most notably on July 4th in Highland Park, just reiterates how important common sense gun legislation is. Now, I filed a bill a year or two ago on safer gun storage laws. And this session, I'm going to support prohibition against assault rifles and high capacity magazines should they come to the legislature. You know, I've always considered myself common sense gun law, and as the Moms Demand Action recognized candidate and endorsed by GPAC, I recognize how important these common sense gun laws are. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Murray, that question to you, please.
There seems to always be this knee-jerk reaction to gun violence, and that's, you know, jumping to ban guns. The focus should not be on taking away guns from law-abiding citizens, but enforcing our existing laws that are already in place at the federal and state level. Democrats refuse to enforce these laws, and they're not protecting us from dangerous criminals, but instead they want to take away our ability to protect ourselves and our families. First and foremost, we need to get the illegal guns off the street. There's 20,000 revoked FOID cards that are still out and in possession, with people in possession of their guns. You know, Chicago police have bragged about seizing 10,000 illegal guns each year from criminals. Each of these felons should be sent to prison for at least 5 years under our current federal law. But in 2020, for example, only 262 were actually prosecuted. So these crimes aren't being prosecuted, or they're getting a slap on the wrist. You know, why? I think it's a combination of lack of will to prosecute and our resources. So I think a solution is potentially the state should establish a special prosecutions bureau within the Attorney General's office to assist local prosecutors so that they can focus and concentrate on prosecuting gun-related crimes. And we also need to support law enforcement. We don't have enough manpower to enforce the existing laws in place. And there's also been an anti-police movement that's led to mass early retirement and vacancies in police jobs. So we need to support law and order and public safety. You know, with regards to the mass shootings, you know, we need stringent background checks. You know, apart from those who perhaps stolen a relative's gun, almost all of the mass shooters shouldn't have passed the background check. So there's also a problem with the background checks. There's a problem with our bloated, incompetent bureaucracy with the system. You know, I have a mental health background. You know, we need to have increasing accessibility to mental health resources, particularly in the school systems. We also should be utilizing technology to identify potential threats that a lot of the shooters post on the internet prior to committing their crimes. Democrats have unleashed a plague of violence upon us with failed policies that are emboldening criminals and are leading to more violence. Their policies aren't working, crime continues to rise, so we need a new and a different approach.
Thank you. That is all the time we have for questions tonight. We will move now to closing statements, and you each have 3 minutes to deliver yours. And candidate Murray, you are up first with your closing statement.
I believe that my opponent and I both have our hearts in the right place, and both of us want to see positive changes in our community. We just have a very different perspective and approach on how to achieve the end results. That's really the key. The current policies in place, many of which that my opponent voted for, have put our state in the wrong direction. I am very much focused on crime, law and order, public safety. I think there is a serious problem with the state of Illinois. It's completely unaffordable. You know, we didn't really talk much about the cost of living, inflation, taxes. It's becoming unbearable to live in the state. We have serious problems also with businesses. Businesses are leaving the state of Illinois because it's increasingly difficult with taxes and a lot of the challenges that business owners are faced with. A lot of companies are leaving the state for the same reason. And you know, finally, there's something that's very near and dear to my heart as a mom, and that's what's been happening the last few years with our at the school districts and with our children in the state, you know, deciding to step into the role of parent and make decisions for our children. And so I am very much focused on, I'm on a mission, and I'm very much focused on making Illinois more affordable, keeping our neighborhoods safe, and empowering people and letting parents be parents.
Thank you. Candidate Ellman, you have 3 minutes for your closing statement.
Thank you. You know, as I speak to you today, I hope you're hearing a common theme. First of all, I take my role as senator very seriously, and that I try to make things better for District 21 and Illinois, not only now, but also in the future. And I do that, and one of my key strengths, I think, is that I listen to science, I listen to practitioners, I listen to stakeholders, and most of all, I listen to people right here in the district. It might not get a lot of headlines, and you won't find me on TV, but we get things done. Now, one thing I want to make clear is we have increased funding to the Illinois State Police so that they can confiscate guns of those with revoked FOID cards. They can enforce those laws, but proliferating more guns is not the answer, particularly high capacity magazines and assault rifles. So I will continue to work with my constituents, work with stakeholders, and really my greatest strength is in the people who live here, who work here, who raise families here. And again, my job is to serve, and I look to being able to do that for another 4 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Ellman. Before we end the forum tonight, we must thank the candidates for your participation tonight. Without your willingness to appear and answer questions that inform the voters, forums like this could not take place. We also thank the Glen Ellen and Naperville chapters of the League for sponsoring this forum tonight. For those of you watching and listening, early voting has already begun. Please be sure to vote on or before November 8th. Thank you.